20 years of careful work vanished in a single afternoon, and the town decided it had always been that way. By sundown, her name was being spoken in lowered voices, and by morning, it was spoken with certainty, as if the truth had finally come out at last. She had been the kind of teacher people trusted without thinking about it. The kind who arrived early and stayed late, who paid for extra notebooks when the school budget ran thin, who remembered which child struggled with reading and which one needed to sit near the window to stay calm. Parents nodded when they passed her on the street. Shopkeepers greeted her by name. She belonged to the town in a quiet, unquestioned way. That was why the ledger bothered her. She hadn't meant to find it. It appeared one late afternoon while she was searching the supply closet for chalk. The cabinet was crooked, its back panel loose, and when she leaned into it, something slid and struck the floor with a dull, heavy sound. It was a thin book, brown and worn, with numbers written in neat columns. At first, she thought it was old-school paperwork, maybe records forgotten from years ago. But the numbers didn't match. She sat at her desk, the room empty except for the ticking wall clock, and checked the figures against the official town reports posted on the bulletin board. Money listed as spent on repairs that were never done. Funds marked for textbooks that never arrived. Small amounts missing at first, then larger ones, spread out carefully, deliberately, over time. Her chest tightened. She told herself there had to be a simple explanation, a clerical error, a misunderstanding. She didn't want to believe what the numbers suggested, because the name signed at the bottom of the pages belonged to the town's most respected man, the mayor. He was everything the town admired. Well-dressed, soft-spoken, generous in public, and careful with his words. He shook hands firmly and smiled often. He donated to the church, sponsored parades, and paid for new benches along Main Street. People said he was proof that success could still come from a small place like theirs. She didn't accuse him. Not at first. She copied the numbers carefully into her own notebook and locked the ledger back where she found it. For days, she barely slept, running figures over and over in her mind, hoping they would change. When they didn't, she decided to do what she had always done as a teacher. She went through proper channels. She requested a private meeting at town hall, choosing her words carefully, bringing only copies of the figures, not the original ledger. The mayor greeted her warmly, offering her a seat, asking after the children at school. His voice was calm, friendly, patient. When she explained what she had found, his smile didn't falter. That's a serious claim," he said gently, as if correcting a child who had made an honest mistake. "I'm sure there's been some confusion." She watched his eyes while he spoke. They were steady, calculating. He asked for the papers, glanced at them briefly, then set them aside. "I'll look into this," he said. "You did the right thing coming to me." For a moment, she believed him. The next day, the sheriff came to the school. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He simply asked her to come with him. The children watched from their desks as she gathered her coat, confusion spreading across their faces. In the hallway, he told her someone had reported missing funds from the school budget. Money she had overseen. Money that had disappeared under her watch. By lunchtime, the story had spread. By evening, it had hardened into fact. The mayor stood on the courthouse steps and spoke of betrayal, of disappointment, of how painful it was to discover that someone trusted for so long had taken advantage of that trust. He never raised his voice. He never said her name outright. He didn't have to. The town filled in the blanks for him. People who had known her for decades nodded along. They told each other it was sad, but not surprising, that no one is as good as they seem. That temptation can find anyone. The ledger she found never surfaced. The figures she copied were dismissed as misunderstandings. Her careful handwriting was called suspicious. She realized then that the truth had never stood a chance. She had tried to do the right thing, and in doing so she had handed a powerful man exactly what he needed: a distraction, a sacrifice. Someone whose fall would protect his place and preserve the town's comforting illusion. That night, alone in her small house, she opened her diary and wrote everything down. Not just the numbers, but the way the mayor had smiled, the way the room had shifted against her, the way certainty had replaced doubt in the town's eyes. They thought shame would make her disappear. They did not yet understand what it meant for a woman who had spent her life watching, listening, and remembering, to finally have nothing left to lose. The letter arrived on a Thursday, folded once and sealed with the school district stamp, as plain and final as the words inside it. Her position was terminated, effective immediately. No hearing, no apology. Just a careful explanation about trust, responsibility, and the school's obligation to the community. She read it twice, then set it on the table and stared at the wall until the light outside shifted and the room went dim. The next morning, she returned her classroom key. The secretary wouldn't meet her eyes. The principal stood stiffly by the door, speaking in a low, uncomfortable voice about how difficult this was for everyone. A cardboard box waited on her desk, already filled with her things. Books she had bought herself, framed drawings from former students, a chipped mug with her name written in marker. No one asked if she needed help carrying it to her car. She walked down the hallway one last time, past doors that were already closing. By the end of the week, the landlord knocked. He was apologetic, almost kind, explaining that he had no choice. Complaints had been made. People were uncomfortable. He needed to think of his own reputation. He gave her 30 days, then 20 when she didn't argue. When she packed her belongings, neighbors watched through their windows, pretending not to. She noticed the way the town moved around her now. Conversations stopped when she approached. Store clerks were polite but distant. A woman she had once shared coffee with crossed the street rather than pass her on the sidewalk. It wasn't anger she saw in their faces. It was certainty, the kind that makes questions unnecessary. Sunday came, and with it, church. She hesitated at the door longer than usual, steadying herself before stepping inside. The sanctuary smelled the same: wood polish and old books, sunlight through the tall windows. For years, this place had been an anchor, a routine that made the town feel whole. She slid into her usual pew, keeping her eyes forward. Whispers followed her like a draft. When the sermon ended, the pastor cleared his throat and spoke carefully about forgiveness, about accountability, about the importance of protecting the community. His words were gentle, but their direction was clear. When the service ended, no one greeted her. No one asked how she was holding up. The familiar warmth of the place had vanished. The following week, she received a quiet visit from a church elder. He stood on her porch, hat in hand, explaining that it might be best if she took some time away. For her own good, he said. For the good of others. She nodded and thanked him for coming. That night, she sat alone in her kitchen, listening to the ticking clock, and realized how completely her life had narrowed. The routines that once defined her days were gone. The respect she had earned over decades had evaporated. Her phone no longer rang. Invitations stopped coming. She replayed every step in her mind, searching for the moment where things could have gone differently. She wondered if she should have stayed silent, if doing nothing would have been kinder to herself. Doubt settled in, heavy and persistent. There were moments when she felt the pull of leaving, of packing what little remained and starting over somewhere no one knew her name. But every time she considered it, the same thought returned. If she left, the story would stay exactly as it was. The mayor continued to appear in public, shaking hands, speaking calmly about unity and moving forward. The town accepted his version because it was easier than questioning it. Her absence would only confirm what they already believed. So she stayed. She took temporary work wherever it was offered, cleaning offices after hours, scrubbing floors in buildings she once entered freely. She kept her head down and her voice steady. People barely noticed her anymore, and when they did, it was with mild discomfort, like seeing something that didn't belong. At night, she wrote. She recorded what had happened, not in anger, but in detail. Dates, conversations, small moments that others overlooked. Writing grounded her, gave shape to days that otherwise blurred together. It reminded her that she was still herself, even if the town refused to see it. Losing her job had hurt. Losing her home had frightened her. Being turned away from the church had cut deeper than she expected. But beneath the loss, something else was forming. A quiet resolve. A sense that what had been taken from her could not be returned by waiting or pleading. They believed she had been broken by shame. What they did not see was that she was learning how to live without their approval, and that knowledge, once gained, could not be taken away. By the time winter edged into the town, most people no longer noticed her at all. She learned this slowly, through small moments. The way doors were left open when she arrived to clean. The way conversations continued as if she were part of the furniture. The way her name was no longer used. She was the cleaner now, spoken about but rarely spoken to. And after months of being watched, judged, and whispered about, the quiet felt almost like relief. Her first steady work came from a woman whose husband sat on the town council. The house was large, warm, and full of expensive things. The woman greeted her politely, kindly even, but without curiosity. Instructions were short and practical. Which rooms to clean, what not to touch, where to leave her coat. The woman never asked questions. That was the rule everywhere. She moved through the house carefully, methodically, keeping her eyes lowered. She scrubbed floors, dusted shelves, washed dishes left from late dinners. When guests came by, no one paused their conversations. Laughter flowed easily, voices confident and relaxed. She became skilled at being unseen. It wasn't just one house. Soon there were others. The banker's home, a local business owner's office. The very people who had turned their backs on her now trusted her alone with their keys. She accepted the work without comment, thanked them politely, and left quietly when the job was done. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. On the surface, she appeared to have accepted her place. Inside, something else was happening. She listened. She noticed patterns. Who spoke too loudly when certain topics came up? Which rooms were kept locked? Which papers were always left face down on desks? Years of teaching had trained her to observe without staring, to remember without reacting. Children had taught her that people often revealed more than they intended when they thought no one important was watching. One afternoon, while wiping fingerprints from a glass cabinet, she caught sight of herself in the reflection. Older, thinner, bent slightly at the shoulders. For a moment, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The sight unsettled her more than she expected. That night, alone in the small room she now rented, she opened her diary and paused. Her hand hovered above the page. She thought about the woman she had been, standing at the front of a classroom, reading aloud to children who trusted her voice, believing that truth, spoken calmly, would always matter. She could still leave. The thought came without warning, heavy and tempting. She could pack her few belongings and go somewhere new, find work where no one knew her story. Let the town keep its version of events. Let the past remain untouched. For the first time, she truly considered it. Then she remembered a student from years ago, a quiet boy who had been blamed for something he didn't do. How the room had turned against him so quickly. How she had stood up then, calmly, firmly, insisting on looking at the facts. She remembered his relief when the truth finally came out. She closed the diary without writing and sat in the dark. The next morning, she returned to work. As weeks passed, people grew comfortable around her. They spoke freely in her presence, assuming her attention was fixed on floors and counters. She learned who feared whom, who owed money, who worried about appearances more than honesty. She noticed how often the mayor's name came up, spoken with respect mixed with caution. In one house, she was asked to clean a study no one else entered. In another, she was told never to open a certain drawer. The instructions were meant to control her, but they also revealed what mattered most. Each evening, she wrote. Not accusations, not conclusions, just facts. Times, words overheard, documents glimpsed but not touched. She resisted the urge to act too quickly. She knew how easily the truth could be twisted. She had learned that lesson already. There were moments when doubt crept in, when she wondered if she was becoming something she didn't recognize. Watching quietly, keeping secrets. Choosing silence when speaking might have been easier. The moral weight of it pressed on her, especially at night. But she reminded herself of the choice she had already made. She had tried honesty once, openly and without strategy, and it had cost her everything. This path was different. This path required patience, restraint, care. She told herself she was not harming anyone. She was only paying attention. The town believed she had faded into the background. What they didn't understand was that invisibility had given her access. And access, when paired with memory and purpose, could be more powerful than any public voice. She continued to clean their homes, her movements quiet, her expression neutral. And while they spoke freely around her, she listened, weighing each detail against her conscience, knowing that when the moment finally came, she would have to decide not just what to reveal, but who she was willing to become in the process. Spring arrived quietly, and with it came carelessness. People relaxed when the weather warmed. Windows were left open. Jackets were draped over chairs. Papers that once stayed locked away began to surface, set aside in moments of distraction and never properly put back. She noticed the change immediately. Comfort made people forgetful, and forgetfulness left traces. It started with a ledger. She found it in the bottom drawer of a desk while cleaning an office that belonged to a local business owner. The drawer stuck slightly, and when it finally opened, the book slid forward. She did not open it right away. She finished dusting, wiped the desk clean, then returned to the drawer as if checking her work. Inside were columns of numbers that did not match the official figures she had seen posted around town. Her hands remained steady. She memorized what she could and closed the drawer exactly as she found it. In another house, she found letters tucked behind a row of books. They were neatly folded, written in a familiar hand, full of careful language meant to sound harmless. They spoke of favors owed, quiet arrangements, promises made in private that would never survive daylight. She did not take them. She read only enough to understand their meaning, then returned them to their place. She learned quickly that the most important things were rarely hidden well. In kitchens, she overheard tense conversations spoken too late at night. In studies, she saw calendars marked with meetings that were never announced publicly. In closets, she found boxes labeled with names that did not belong to the homeowner. Each discovery felt heavier than the last. At night, she wrote everything down. Her diary grew thicker, its pages filled with dates, initials, and careful descriptions. She avoided exaggeration. She avoided emotion. She wrote as a teacher would, recording facts for someone else to understand later. The discipline steadied her. It reminded her that this was not about anger. It was about truth, even if the truth had to wait. Still, the waiting was not easy. There were moments when she sat with the diary open and wondered where the line was. She asked herself whether knowing these things made her responsible for them, whether silence was a form of agreement, whether she was protecting herself or simply delaying what she feared most. One evening, while cleaning the mayor's sister's home, she found a folder left on the dining table. It was thin, unmarked, easy to overlook. Inside were copies of bank statements and a short note written in the same careful tone she remembered all too well. The figures matched the ones that had cost her everything. Her breath caught. For a long moment, she did nothing. This was proof. Real proof. Not rumors, not impressions. Something solid enough to matter. She closed the folder and placed it back exactly where it had been. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished tabletop. She looked calm, capable. No one would have guessed what she was holding inside. That night, she did not write right away. She sat by the window and thought about the cost. She thought about how easily the town had believed the lie before. She thought about how quickly they might turn again, not just on the mayor, but on each other. She understood now that exposing the truth would not restore order. It would fracture it. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on her. But she also thought about the children she had taught, about lessons she had repeated year after year, that doing the right thing was rarely comfortable, that silence often helped the wrong side, that fear did not disappear by being obeyed. She opened the diary and wrote until her hand ached. As weeks passed, the evidence multiplied. Ledgers appeared in different houses, all reflecting the same quiet pattern. Letters crossed paths, revealing connections that had been denied publicly. She began to see the shape of it clearly. Not one man acting alone, but a circle. People who protected one another because their secrets were tied together. The town's respect was built on shared silence. She was careful not to change her behavior. She arrived on time. She cleaned thoroughly. She spoke when spoken to and never lingered. Trust, she had learned, was easiest to gain when you seemed to want nothing. Sometimes, someone would thank her kindly. Sometimes, they would avoid her eyes. None of them suspected that the woman emptying their trash carried more knowledge than the town newspaper. There were nights when she dreamed of the classroom, of chalk dust and steady routines. She woke with a familiar ache, missing the life that had been taken from her. Those mornings were the hardest. They made her question whether any ending could justify what she was preparing to do. But each doubt was answered by another discovery, another piece of the puzzle, another reminder that the story told about her had been a convenient lie. By early summer, the diary was full. She read through it slowly, page by page, making sure every detail aligned. She imagined the moment when it would no longer be private, when the quiet work of months would collide with the town's carefully maintained image. She did not feel triumph. She felt resolve. They had believed she was powerless because she worked in their shadows. They had mistaken her silence for acceptance. What they did not understand was that she had been gathering the truth patiently, deliberately, knowing that once it was released, there would be no way to gather it back again. The town woke early that morning, dressed in its best mood. Banners stretched across Main Street. Folding chairs lined the square. The holiday celebration had always been a point of pride, a reminder that the town was united, orderly, and good. Families arrived smiling, greeting one another with easy familiarity. Bells rang from the church tower, steady and confident. No one noticed her at first. She moved through the quiet streets before the crowd gathered, her steps measured, her coat pulled close against the morning air. In her bag were copies, neatly arranged, each one chosen carefully. She did not rush. She did not look back. At the church, she paused. For years, those doors had opened to her without question. For years, she had believed they stood for fairness and truth. Now they were simply wood and iron, like anything else shaped by human hands. She took a breath, steadying herself, and began. Page by page, she posted them where everyone would see. Ledgers showing missing funds. Letters written in polite language that masked private deals. Records that matched across households, across years. Nothing exaggerated, nothing altered. Just the truth laid out plainly, without commentary or accusation. When she finished, she stepped back. The first person to notice was a man walking his daughter to the square. He slowed, frowned, and leaned closer to read. Then he called someone over. Soon, a A small group formed, whispers spreading faster than the bells. By the time the mayor arrived, the crowd had shifted. People stood clustered near the church doors instead of the square. Voices overlapped, faces tightened. The celebration music played on, uncertain and misplaced. The mayor approached with his usual calm, his practiced smile ready, until he saw the papers. For the first time, his expression faltered. Questions came quickly, too quickly to manage. Someone recognized a name. Someone else recognized a signature. A business owner stepped back, pale, as a neighbor read aloud a letter meant to stay hidden. The circle of trust the town had relied on began to crack under its own weight. The mayor tried to speak. He raised his hands, asked for calm, suggested misunderstandings. But the words no longer landed the way they once had. Too many details lined up. Too many people saw their own names, or the names of those they trusted, woven together in a pattern that could not be ignored. The town did what it had always done when certainty broke. It turned inward. Voices sharpened. Accusations flew. Old grudges surfaced. Now armed with proof, allies became liabilities. People stepped away from one another, protecting themselves first. The celebration dissolved. Chairs left empty, banners sagging in the midday heat. No one looked for her. She stood at the edge of the crowd for a moment, watching it unravel. There was no satisfaction in her face, no triumph, only a quiet acceptance of what had been set in motion. She did not wait to be thanked. She did not wait to be forgiven. She turned and walked away. By the time the sun reached its highest point, she was already on the road leading out of town. She carried little with her. The diary was gone, its purpose fulfilled. Her steps felt lighter than they had in years, though the future ahead remained uncertain. She knew the town would argue about her for years. Some would say she had gone too far. Others would say she had done what no one else dared. Her name would be spoken again, this time with hesitation, maybe even respect, or maybe not. She had learned not to depend on that. What mattered was simpler. She had refused to disappear quietly. She had refused to carry a lie that did not belong to her. The truth had cost her once, but this time, it had also freed her. As the town faded behind her, she did not look back. Not because there was nothing left there, but because she no longer needed their approval to know who she was. She had chosen patience over anger, clarity over comfort, and courage over silence. Somewhere ahead, there would be a place where her story was unknown, where she could begin again without explaining herself, where her name belonged only to her. And in towns like the one she left behind, people would remember the day everything they thought was solid came apart. Not because of noise or force, but because one quiet woman paid attention, wrote things down, and waited. If a single person listening to her story ever finds themselves doubted, dismissed, or quietly pushed aside, they might remember this. Silence is not the same as surrender, and sometimes, the ones everyone overlooks are the only ones who see the whole truth clearly enough to change everything.